I can offer some advice, and can I clarify from the start that Acara, when it involves itself in these kind of international projects, is there to support, not there to tell you what to do. So it's when you ask for our advice, sometimes it's based on our own experience, but also what we've seen elsewhere, and I offer it in that context. The point I think that was made about leaving, I think as I understood it, allowing the consultation to actually have no definition and parameters, I suspect is problematic. I certainly know from experiences in the past, it gives a licence almost to those who are opposing change to mount submissions based around that. Whereas in fact, what you want is feedback on the actual material, and therefore I think the advice that was provided over here, having some key questions that need to be addressed. My recommendation would be, using your tremendous infiltration strategies that I'm aware of, is to get the consultation process to address those key matters that are about the document, not about whether there should be a national curriculum or what process should be followed. Others, even when you have that, others will, insert their own perspective on those other things. But if you leave it open, you can guarantee some will never get, you'll get a mix of data, and that's not what you're after. So my advice would be to really push for some key questions about the material, about the document, and not leave space for people to occupy it with their own issues. So there's no question about whether there should be or not national curriculum. That's played out in other, fields.
O Brasil tem uma tradição de decidir currículo por porcentagens. X% para tal coisa e Y% para outra coisa. E fala-se muito em flexibilidade quando, se um currículo é bom, ele é obrigatoriamente flexível. É inerente ao bom currículo ele ser flexível. Se nós não conseguirmos produzir uma base nacional comum flexível, nós construímos a pior base nacional comum que existe, que é a inflexibilidade. Então, já temos isso, não precisamos fazer isso jamais. Eu gostaria de saber, porque quando se fala em ter uma parte do ensino médio liberada, entre aspas, da base nacional comum, já se está pressupondo que a base nacional comum não é boa. Porque se ela fosse realmente de qualidade, ela teria aberturas para flexível. Como é que o senhor vê? Para mim isso parece um dilema que tem, na minha opinião, eu tentei ver currículo em todos os países cuja língua tinha um mínimo de acesso. Eu nunca vi um país que decida currículo por porcentagem. X% para uma coisa, X% para outra. E uma base nacional comum deveria ser suficientemente flexível para, dentro da base nacional comum, abrir caminhos para a profissionalização, para o mundo do trabalho, para projetos de vida, etc. Caso contrário, ela não é boa. Eu gostaria de saber um pouco qual é a visão que o senhor tem desta tradição e se existe algum outro lugar do mundo onde se decide currículo por porcentagem.
Pela oportunidade, acho que é bem relacionado essa ideia de relacionamento de uma métrica temporal, né, tempos, né, de horas, com a proposta curricular, principalmente em relação à questão da base nacional comum, me parece algo que nós deveríamos evitar. Né? Vai muito na linha do que a Zomar está dizendo. Eu, pessoalmente, penso que o currículo, a base nacional curricular para uma determinada etapa, que seja o ensino médio, o ensino fundamental, ela tem que ser uma base total, sobre a qual os currículos vão se construir. Porque, para fazer um exemplo, né, eu posso perfeitamente desenvolver habilidades e conhecimentos de física, de química e de matemática, ensinando, né, um jovem em princípios de técnica de construção civil. Não há nenhuma contradição em relação a isso. Eu posso perfeitamente desenvolver, né, numa criança e num jovem, através da aplicação de técnicas aplicativas de teatro, ou de música, ou de estudos do meio, um conjunto de habilidades e conhecimentos que não necessariamente podem ser ou deveriam ser construídos através de crianças olhando para um professor na sala de aula e escrevendo na lousa e tudo mais. Quer dizer, por isso eu acho que há uma confusão insistente, né, que a gente percebe em muitos lugares, de base nacional comum com currículo. Né? É claro que a base nacional comum era de natureza curricular, mas são as escolas, os professores, os projetos pedagógicos que vão interpretar, segundo as suas circunstâncias, essa proposta.
É exatamente o que eu quis dizer.
Por isso pela oportunidade na continuidade, porque eu acho que nós não podemos ter essa visão reducionista. Quer dizer, é uma contradição falsa essa história de dizer que tem 70% de base e depois 30% de qualquer outra coisa. Na minha visão, a base tem que ser 100%, é 100% disso. Né? Agora, são as escolas que vão verificar as possibilidades, de acordo com as suas circunstâncias e condições, de como implementar esses objetivos. Eu reconheço, no final das contas, quais são as preocupações dos gestores educacionais. Portanto, não me surpreende que o Conselho tenha feito essa proposta restritiva. Pelo menos o que eu li é o que está posto lá. Ela é restritiva. Ela está reduzindo os objetivos e os direitos de aprendizagem de crianças e jovens, no caso de jovens brasileiros. Porque ela está dizendo uma parte pequena e não a parte total. Então, eu gostaria de perguntar exatamente se essa, que me parece uma contradição muito séria, né, de ficar pensando base nacional curricular comum, confundindo a própria base com o currículo específico das escolas, então esse é o problema. Mas o ponto principal, será que nós necessariamente precisamos utilizar, ao definir a base nacional comum, uma métrica de tempo, ou seja, o que é que cabe, né, em termos de número de horas em relação a certos conteúdos e habilidades? Essa é a questão.
Só fazer um parênteses, só para esclarecer. O que o Conselho levou não é da base. O que o Conselho levou é sobre reformulação do ensino médio, que é muito diferente. Só um parênteses.
Ao invés de Rafa e Diane, a gente pode responder essa depois, então não tem a ver com essa questão. Não. Então podemos voltar?
Eu posso fazer uma desculpa pequena? Consideração também, acho que está bem relacionada. Em que medida, não sei se é até exatamente o que você vai colocando, em que medida a gente pode se furtar a discutir o tamanho da jornada escolar que, particularmente no ensino médio, comparativamente às estatísticas internacionais, o Brasil está muito distante. Nos anos iniciais do ensino fundamental, a jornada é bem parecida ao resto do mundo. Nos anos finais a gente já se distancia e no ensino médio a gente está longe desse praticamente país.
Eu posso daí sobre esse tema? Eu perguntaria que orientação ele daria para a discussão que vai se instalar agora sobre a questão do ensino médio. Então, que orientação que seria bom para ajudar a discussão que vai ser posta?
Yeah. Okay. So several questions there. Mostly related, but some out here. So I'll attempt to go through each, and please let me know if I've missed something here. On the point around percentages and countries and the tradition here, I can say most countries actually do have notional amounts of time. However, it is often not formally described and defined, as you are at the moment, it appears. Sometimes it's defined for the writers, to keep the writers within a parameter. For example, telling in Australia, for those writing the English curriculum, the language of our country, you have this amount of time that you're constructing the learning around. For health and physical education, you don't have as much as English language. So in other words, and that's to contain this tendency of subject specialist writers of extending, that their subject is more important than anybody else's, and so on. So that's not unusual for writers to have a notional allocation of time that they've got to work within. But culture plays a role here too. If you look at many curricula from around the world, you can't tell. They don't describe the allocation of time. But it might be for some of them, it actually is defined by textbooks, that there's actually other documentation that teachers are asked to deliver through that actually are the, textbooks this big compared to this big. So there's various ways that prioritisation takes place. The issue around the flexibility, I think, is a really good one. One, you can build flexibility into a curriculum by simply how you construct the learning objectives, enabling the teacher to make choices, to incorporate local contexts, and not defining curriculum so that it is just a series of dot points where a teacher is effectively going through a checklist, one after the other, but has some capacity to work holistically. I think very much the point you made there about the various approaches that a teacher might take. There's another factor here, and that is, I guess, country by country, it's the capacity of the teachers. How strong are they? And yes, within metropolitan areas, they may be, there's almost a guarantee of professionalism. There's almost expectations placed on them in various communities by the parent community and so on. But as you move into more rural, remote areas, unfortunately, but it's an observation, less capacity of the teacher to actually make those various choices and so on. So some countries, they actually don't have to define the curriculum. Finland's a very good example. The teachers are incredibly highly qualified at the extreme levels of the world. Estonia is another country that has very highly qualified teachers to the point where the community is relaxed. These are intelligent, articulated, well-educated individuals who actually, the community can be confident that they will always make good choices. When I asked the Finns, it wasn't me actually, it was one of the participants at a recent conference I was at, what do they do about poor performing teachers? What's their methodology of removing poor? And there was like 10 minutes of thought, and then the answer was, occasionally I hear of one, but it's like this just doesn't exist because they choose hard at the beginning. They choose hard and they manage easy. I don't know what your circumstances are here. I don't want to speculate. But I know in some countries you've actually got to be a little bit more defined in the curriculum because the capacity of the teachers to actually inject their own intellect and ways of learning and teaching may not be strong across the country. The issue of high school. I'm just trying to remember what that... Oh, the school day, yes. Tonight I get on a plane to travel to Saudi Arabia. Right? I'm supporting Saudi Arabia in a similar way for their development of their national curriculum, their first national curriculum. When we analysed with them last year about their vision and how much time they currently spend teaching Arabic and Islamic studies, and the amount of school days they have in the year, and what they wanted to achieve, which was not unlike your capabilities, what they wanted to have their young people able to do. Our advice to them was, you're not going to be able to achieve that. There's just too much time. You've only got, you're one of the lowest in the world of school days and days in a year, and then you're taking it up with Islamic studies and Arabic. You'll never achieve. So you're going to actually have to do something. And guess what they've done? They've got a bill going through saying that school is going to be longer in the day and more days during the year, because actually to achieve their vision, they've got to change things. By the way, they're going to reduce Islamic studies and Arabic, and by prioritising and really being clear about absolute priorities within both. So that might be something you have to do, and it's another one of those issues that you can't avoid. I guess you've got to be frank and say, this is the amount of time we've got, this is our purpose. I go back to that. This is what we want from high school, the high school years. This is the time we've got. We're going to have to make some choices here, and that might mean extending the hours. By the way, from what I understand, again, I might be misinterpreting this, you want an engaging 3 years there, otherwise children won't turn up. They won't attend anyway, so whatever hours you've got, they're not going to achieve anything as well. So the curriculum has to be engaging, and it's the point back here. I think I'm getting through every point here. Differentiation. Yes, you want children doing maths in those final 3 years, I assume. Should they all be doing the same maths course? I can't understand how a child who has only got some basics from elementary mathematics, nine years of elementary basic curriculum, how they could be in the same classroom learning the same content with a child who already completed that basic mathematics 5 years beforehand, basically had strong capability. I'm assuming they want to be extended. They're needing to be extended, and they're wanting to be extended. So separate courses. That's the options. It's not kind of limiting that way. It means actually giving options across.
queria só que a pergunta do César não só sobre isso, né, mas sobre a base ser o todo, e não a discussão sobre 60, 40, 70, isso aí vem com o César, da diversificação do currículo.
Yes.
Acho que seria muito interessante você falar um pouco sobre isso, e eu mesmo.
Yeah, sure. I would think most countries that would specify a 60-40% split and talk about a core curriculum would actually be meaning the core is only made up of mathematics and the language of the country and maybe science, and the rest then is all localised. I'm assuming, what the proposal here is to have 13 subjects in the 60%. And so the 40%, I can't quite understand that unless what that is...
It's for
Professional Studies.
Não é nem para o ensino médio como um todo. Não é nem para o ensino médio especificamente. Acho que a discussão do César é para a base como um todo. Quando o MEC publicou a primeira versão da base, ele disse que aquele conjunto de conhecimentos e habilidades deveria ocupar 60%, e aí não está claro se é do tempo ou do conteúdo, mas tinha esse número de 60% comum e 40% ficaria a cargo do Estado, e não se discutiu na ocasião se significava 40% de novas coisas ou 40% de coisas daquelas coisas aprofundadas. Então, acho que a pergunta é como é que é isso?
Provavelmente o MEC disse isso, porque nós estamos dizendo isso desde o Império.
E por que, Biomar, tem uma...
Então existe uma coisa já...
De que não seja todo, de que não seja algo que uniformize demais, que seja inflexível. Acho que essa é a discussão.
Mas no ensino médio... No ensino médio, os 40% contemplariam esta parte que você estava dizendo que um aluno poderia fazer uma matemática mais básica e outro uma matemática mais elevada. Também seria isso. Quer dizer, o que seria o comum é aquilo que é obrigatório para todos os alunos, sem opção. Aí os alunos que têm uma possibilidade de aprofundar maior entrariam.
Yeah, so they're all doing maths. They're just doing it at different levels. In Australia, I can tell you that we have an 80% is the Australian curriculum for the states and territories, the schools, and 20% is determined at the local state school level. And the reason behind that is we have a large percentage of our schools, about 20% of our schools are Catholic or religious schools and have religious education as a very strong component. The argument from some states that they have particular initiatives that might be, you mentioned earlier, it might be a particular premier or a minister who has an interest in environmental education or something, and so that was to give space. It was largely to help the states see that the Australian curriculum wasn't consuming all of the time that they might have available to them, to give them some flexibility to add their own initiatives. But also, if a state wants to say, well, 80%, but we actually want you to do more English than actually what the Australian curriculum has included. If they want to add additional activities and projects within each of those learning areas, or some of them, they can do that. So that was, it was largely for pragmatic reasons more than anything else. I don't know what the motivation is here, but I suspect it's a transition period from having localised curriculum to having a national curriculum. Means some people feel that they're going to lose local identity, local activities, the flavour of local. I think your point earlier is it potentially can be blended into, it could be 100% with local, local blended into, the existing 13 subjects.
60 e 40, gente, isso é só confusão. 60-40 is only confusion creator, really. Foi muito mais uma posição política para acopar tudo, para amenizar. Então, isso, não tem resistência. Mas assim, a pergunta é um pouco para o outro lado. Por exemplo, tanto na Austrália quanto em outros países que você tem acompanhado, qual é a idade que se espera que uma criança esteja sabendo, ela consiga ler e escrever? Não vou falar alfabetizar, porque tem vários conceitos. E outra questão também, quando a Acara organizou o currículo australiano, depois de ter, né, feito tal, quem que aprovou? Né, qual foi a instância? Teve alguma instância pós, né, como é que aconteceu isso?
Ok.
A minha pergunta é uma sobre comunicação e a outra formação. A gente percebe que em muitos Estados Unidos se mobilizando para levar essa discussão para ponta para os professores, mas a gente ainda percebe muito desconhecimento por parte dos professores com relação à base. E nessa direção, como, pela sua experiência, como é que trabalhou com essa informação dos professores para essa base?
Yeah. Okay.
Tem uma outra pergunta? Não?
These are turtle questions that are snuck in.
Perguntas jabutis, né? Que chegam despercebidas.
We have 4 questions, so if you wait, just ask all the questions and then you can just.
Okay.
Sou eu? Então tá. São duas aqui. O que foram os públicos mais difíceis de serem convencidos sobre o currículo australiano? Que estratégias vocês usaram para convencê-los? E depois de tantas conversas com o MEC, o que você acha que é o melhor apoio que a gente pode dar ao Ministério neste momento da construção da base?
O Common Core e outros currículos são muito centrados em linguagem de matemática. No Brasil, o esforço pela base parte da obrigatoriedade de 13 componentes curriculares, 13 disciplinas do ensino médio e 8 no fundamental avançado. Ora, esse constrangimento impõe que a base pense cada um desses 13 componentes. Não pode dizer que é para português e matemática e o resto fica com os estados. Esse constrangimento é antigo. Quando nós pensamos nos parâmetros, há 2 décadas atrás, já sugerimos pensar em áreas do conhecimento. Essas áreas foram literalmente ignoradas, tanto pela escola quanto pela formação de professores. Ou seja, nós tínhamos uma tradição dessa fragmentação disciplinar que não foi possível superar. Nesse momento, seria importante que as áreas de fato se impusessem tanto na articulação escolar quanto na formação de professores. O que o senhor sugeriria para a nossa estratégia nesse sentido?
Okay, ready to go? Okay, in terms of other countries and my experience with early literacy and numeracy development, age at which a young person is sufficiently literate to be able to continue their education and engage with each of the subjects. Usually it's around age 7, 8. In Australia that's year 2 and 3, although in terms of language development, reading capacity, at the end of the first year of school is usually when you have indicators of whether a child is experiencing difficulties that essentially means a particular intervention. So, in other words, you don't leave it too long before there's an intervention. But that's not necessarily across the world that those interventions actually happen. I'll give you a good example that in Australia our national test for literacy and numeracy is in year 3, so that's for about 8-year-old children. The assumption is then that they used to be called basic skills. It used to be that we would expect at that point that the majority of children have reached these basic skills, and then we set benchmarks that effectively are a point in time, a cut point in the performance, that if you're below that, then we know you are going to have difficulties in schooling beyond that unless your performance is lifted. The authorising body In Australia, I hate to disappoint you, but the ministers do, the politicians do give the final approval. However, the process is such that there are an authorising board, and then a coalition of the senior bureaucrats who effectively will not send it to the ministers unless they believe that it's of the quality that the writers were asked to produce. So in other words, by the time it comes to the ministers, the advice that they receive is that this is of quality. They have followed so it's about process more than anything else, and that the process has been followed. This is what we asked to happen. This is what happened. These were the issues that were raised in consultation. This was done what was done to address these issues. It is now ready, Minister, for you to approve. And you know that's so. There, yes, the ministers do have a role, but the agency tends to be, if you like, somewhat independent of that, and every effort is made to avoid individual ministers inserting their own personal preferences. And the argument that is used is there's been through consultation, it's had experts analyse this, it's had experts involved. You will be undermining the confidence of the public in having a thorough consultation process to then ignore that and insert your own personal interests.
O ministro tem a ver, então, executivo. São os ministros dos estados, das
Isso,
províncias?
na Austrália a gente chama secretários estaduais de ministro também. Então a instância de aprovação é um conselho de todos os secretários estaduais que não tem
Yes.
Australian context.
São todos os ministros, secretários de educação estaduais num conselho junto com o ministro federal. Não passa pelo Congresso.
Não passa.
Pelo Congresso Federal.
São ministros de educação.
Sim. Só
Yeah.
o ministro federal.
É o CONSED com mais um MEC.
É isso mesmo.
Oh, yeah, sorry, I should have said that. It's not, a minister, for water inserting their own view about what should be in the curriculum. Yeah. Thanks, Dave. In terms of teacher training, absolutely any curriculum change has to have what are the implications for training of teachers. I would have thought part of the reason for having sort of 60%, 40%, those sort of terms, is for state by state to determine which priorities they will give, because the difference in their state of what the teachers are currently doing and the change. There has to be a gap analysis. If what is to be produced is something that is totally new and challenging, then a state would be wise to say, we're not going to implement this all at one time. We're going to phase in the implementation so we can afford the professional learning, the training of teachers to upskill them in that. So that's typically what would happen. A gap analysis between what the teachers currently do and know and what the new curriculum is requiring, and then phasing training and phasing implementation based on that. The most difficult stakeholders, Anna. To be frank, states that don't particularly care about any other state. and only really interested in projecting their own claim of being at a higher standard than everybody else. So I think unions, teacher unions, can be. We had a lot of support actually at the national level, but within states sometimes, particularly if there's a friction between the union and the state bureaucracy, that can be a bit disruptive and be against the national effort. And then groups, academics that and media that want to. Well, I should separate that. Academics that have a ideology of their own, that they've written articles, they've claimed to fame around the world, or is around particular a viewpoint about how reading should be taught, or so they will inject themselves in the debate. By the way, my view is pragmatic on every issue, whether it's history, whether it's reading. You do get extreme ideologies, and there's usually some good ideas in this and usually some good ideas in that, and the balance is usually the right approach that's actually going to deliver, given the complexity of children and the issues. Media in Australia is problematic in that it's a vehicle to attack the government, and so you might have particular media aspects of the media that are just searching for some binary issue to divide the public. So that would be the main ones. The best support a group such as this, I've got to be frank, I haven't encountered a mobilised group like this. I was saying to David earlier that Australia could do with one of these in some of the matters some of the issues we need to address in schooling. I don't think I can give you much advice. You seem to be very active and strategic, and I would just advise you to continue doing that. I think a point was made somewhere earlier. My observation, just from the engagement I've had with ministers, bureaucrats and ministers that are supportive, is they want help. So the things that are going to help them around the issues that they are struggling with is where I'd be focusing energy. Yet I know the tension there is that at times you've got to be a critic and a helper, and so there's a tension in that, and I appreciate that, and I appreciate the fact that the more you help, the more you're aligned with the end product, and it might be an end product that you don't want to be aligned with. So I'll leave you to... There are smarter people around this room than me about how to work that strategy. The 13 subjects, 8 subjects, what you've got here is not unusual in Portugal, but it's not unusual in model or design, but in implementation it's the problem. Not the problem, but I see that it is different to what I've experienced before. Most countries have 8 learning areas, or subjects, they sometimes call them. And then when it moves into the senior years, or the high school you call it here, the senior years, you have far more subjects, but you also tend to have choice. So you're not doing the 13 subjects. They've grown out of the 8 learning areas. For example, in the primary or elementary years, the first 6-7 years of school, there's a subject called social sciences, or sometimes you call it human sciences here. But as a child gets older, in the end, choices tend to be made about whether they would do the history subject of that, or the geography subject of that, or it might be citizenship or civics, or it might be about economics and business. So in other words, the 13 subjects grow from the 8 learning areas, but there's I haven't seen. I've seen countries where students do, they do a lot of subjects in the final years, but they actually choose in the end which of those they will be assessed in, and it tends to be countries where those subjects are kind of taken for interest. They're not the ones that the child is constructing their future pathway through. So that would be the only comment I'd make there about.
Para nós são todos obrigatórios. All are obligatory.
I know.
Every student must take all the 13 subjects.
I know.
And todo mundo tem que fazer todos os componentes. Mais do que isso, na formação dos professores, não há nenhum esforço na articulação do conhecimento em área. Então, um professor de sociologia, digamos, vê o estudante uma hora por semana e tem um número enorme de turmas, não sabe nem o nome dos seus estudantes, e nós precisamos fazer um esforço de compactar. Um esforço que nós estamos tentando fazer, Calegar e eu, é construir criar uma escola para formar professores por área do conhecimento, para aumentar o pertencimento do professor à escola. No plano legal, me parece impossível tirar esse jogo.
Yeah, can I comment?
Diretrizes podem ser modificadas. As diretrizes são do Conselho Nacional, não são da lei. Não está na lei, que são 13 disciplinas. Nas diretrizes.
Can I comment here that
Na nossa lei, se a gente só der filosofia e sociologia, a escola é legal.
Okay, that's good. Do you know the expression elephant in the room? Okay. So I think you've got an elephant in the room, but you can tell me if I'm seeing elephants. Well, there's 2 elephants in the room, so that's not a lot of space for the rest of us. Firstly, typically, there's a point in time in a child's schooling career when it's assumed that they have the basics for life and they could actually leave school and continue in life and undertake employment without any further schooling. And that's typically called they've got the basic education that they need. So as an observer, without knowing the realities of your context, my observation would be, so the end of year 9, that's called elementary, like those years before you go to high school, you're equipped. If you, the way the curriculum is constructed, you leave, you've got what you need to survive. It may not be a lot, it's not going to get you into university and so on, but you'll be able to live a life. Therefore, the years that follow are actually about something else. This is that purpose I was talking about later. They're actually to grow and develop further, to reach a higher qualification, to follow a pathway to university, or to follow a pathway to particular vocational training or follow a pathway into work that actually might have a greater level of technical skill, maybe not university requirements, but are a more challenging, if you like, environment. So why then you'd have 13 subjects, I don't know, because you've actually already got, you've already got what you need. These are enhancements to that. So it could be what you're telling me is, guess what, Phil, after 9 years, a large amount of our population actually doesn't have the basics, and they've still got to keep doing more basics. They need a longer number of years. The other elephant in the room is this a matter of teacher employment? So in effect, if you give students choice, then guess what? If a lot of children don't choose to do science, then you've got a lot of science teachers unemployed. There are some techniques where you actually can, you can put some kind of caveats in there, some little rules that mean that you have to choose a subject from this area and that area. You don't have to do all the sciences, but you can do biology if you want to, or you could do, so in other words, there's choice within parameters. So I don't know if the elephant in the room is, teacher industrial, keeping teachers employed and happy and yeah, and the other elephant is, we call it elementary education, but elementary education for too many of the population might go into the extra 3 years of high school. I don't know if that's a fair comment or unfair comment, but...
Acho que temos grandes elefantes. Então, com a base, acho que essa discussão está um elefantário, né? Muitos elefantes na sala. Gente, infelizmente, a gente chegou muito rápido, muito mais rápido do que a gente gostaria às 10 horas, na verdade são 10h15. A minha sugestão é que a gente dê um tempinho rápido para o Phil fazer comentários finais, uma mensagem-chave que ele queira deixar para a gente. Pode ser? E quaisquer perguntas, a gente também pode fazer depois, registrar, mandar para vocês. Algumas pessoas mandaram por e-mail, a Natasha, o Osvaldo, e a gente registra isso e compartilha com todos vocês, tá bem? Phil, comentários finais?
I think my advice to you would be a key message that you should always be inserting is, this is in the interests of children. There are all these other people who they're coming from different angles for their own purpose, but the kind of communication message is, this is in the interest of our young people for their future and for the future of our country. That's why doing a national effort is so important, and it's also why it's important to get it right. Secondly, you are not alone in struggling with all these issues, and I would think, buying some time for those issues that actually need, a longer debate about purpose, such as high school, I think is a wise thing to do. And I think, the final message I'd give is, it's inevitable that the documents will improve. They will improve. And, sorry, you hope? That they will improve. You won't ever reach excellence. Every country, every curriculum writer pursues that, and if that happens, you will never do it. You'll never finish. So there has to be a point in time when you say, now I've got to be careful how I word this. This is good enough to now start implementing, but we're not just going to let it rest there. We're going to monitor it, and we're going to look for opportunities in the future to enhance it. So, in other words, but I know you might reach a point where you say it's not good enough. And what good enough is, we had a discussion yesterday about quality measures. How do you measure quality in curriculum? And the team here have a really, fair for me to share that. The team have a sense of what quality curriculum measures are. And it's more than just yes or no. It's like no, getting better, yes. So I think at the point, there's going to be a point in time when holistically you make a judgment that this now has coherence, this now has clarity, this now is pitched appropriately, that conceptually it's challenging enough for children but not too challenging. It has rigour, effectively, and it's comparable. It's not the same as, but it's comparable with other countries in their approach. That'd be the main messages, I think.
Bom, thank you. Então, queria